Okay, I'm drying tomatoes for the last few days, and I've been wanting to make a YouTube video on this to show people how to dry tomatoes and use them in your raw food recipes, or even in recipes if you're making soups and stews, or just about anything, or just to eat like that. So I start, of course, with my nice red tomatoes, and then I use a Madeleine on the thicker side. You can flip this little thing over. The other side is a thin slice. You don't want the slices too thin because they become paper thin. They're hard to get off your dehydrator sheets, and it's kind of like you're doing double the time. You can get by with about 1/4 inch thick on your tomatoes. And one thing I'd advise, this has happened to me, that's why I kind of laugh. I'm using a front load, a stainless steel dehydrator, the TSM dehydrator, but I have a 10 tray also that has a temperature control. And years ago I filled it up, it was summertime, filled it up and had it going about, it was probably about 110, 115, 16, 17. And I came home, and when I walked in the door, I knew something was wrong. And so it was because there was too much moisture in them, and the 10 tray was so tall that the heat didn't get to the top, and they just kind of spoiled it in there from the heat. They fermented. So I had to throw all those away. So I've learned by experience that particular dehydrator, I don't use more than 5 trays of tomatoes, and I rotate them, and sometimes I even squeeze some of the seeds and some of the liquid out of them if I'm doing that dehydrator. Right now I'm not doing that dehydrator. I'm doing the stainless steel dehydrator. So I fill my dehydrator sheet, and I have them all just barely touching, all nice and neat on my tray. And last night I started some tomatoes probably around 9 o'clock, and they got done probably around noon today or so. And you can tell they're done. They kind of bend and snap and crack and break real easy, so you can tell they're done. And then at that point I remove them. And just be careful when you're getting these end pieces. That would be these pieces like, say, this. These tend to don't dry as fast. So on these pieces right here, I always make sure they're dry, and you'll feel them. If they're not dry, there's a little soggy spot on them, and if they're not, I just leave them on there, and I take off what's dry and I put some new ones on, or I just don't do that tray and keep a tray with the ones that aren't dry yet, and then I refill these trays and put them in. And in my dehydrator, I start at about 145 for the first hour, just to help with some of that moisture, and then after that I drop down my dehydrator so that it's still alive, live food. So here are these tomatoes, and I store them in jars. I have this jar I've started filling up with nice tomatoes. I got quite a few in here. And when I'm making recipes that I want tomato powder, all I do is take some of these dried tomatoes and I put them in my bullet blender, and I blend them in there. I just keep blending it until it's completely into a powder, and you will get a powder. It might take a few minutes depending on what kind of blender you have. Just be patient. This does it pretty fast, but this can be stored in a glass jar also. I like to do it as I need it, just because I find sometimes it likes to cake up, and it just makes it easier if I just do some real quick, or just do enough for maybe a couple weeks if I'm using it a lot at the time. So there are my dried tomatoes and my tomato powder, and this isn't easy for you, so you can see exactly how I put them on there. And I thank you. Bye-bye.